As you heard in the last episode, in January 1995, wolves were back in Yellowstone and central Idaho. Federal officials had gone through with their controversial plan to reintroduce them in the American West, after they had been nearly wiped out there through a decades-long eradication program. But almost as soon as the wolves were on the ground, there was a problem.
House come to order, first order of business, roll call. Clerk
And the problem was the Idaho legislature. One thing to know about Idaho lawmakers is that a lot of them are ranchers and farmers. And by and large, they did not want wolves back. To make things even trickier, when the feds forced wolves on Idaho, they left it to the state to come up with a plan for how to manage them, how to track their numbers, how to make sure they were healthy, that sort of thing. That meant Idaho legislators had to craft a plan for a program they didn't want in the first place. Not surprisingly, it went badly. Their first attempt was way out of step with the reintroduction guidelines.
Frankly, I think we perhaps shot ourselves in the foot on this one. It's obvious that from what has been said by Fish and Wildlife Service that they can't possibly accept the provisions that were entered into this bill.
That's the late Idaho State Representative Golden Linford, appearing on the show Idaho Reports. At the time, he led the Idaho House Resources and Conservation Committee. For Golden, things went from bad to worse. The state legislature decided to reject any proposal to work with the feds on wolves. That meant that Idaho Fish and Game officers weren't going to help in any way to manage the animals.
The state is out of the picture. We are not in the management of these wolves, and that was my concern, that Idaho would be a player.
Idaho's boycott of wolf reintroduction left the feds in a serious pickle. They didn't have the resources to monitor and study the new populations of wolves on their own. That was especially true in Idaho, with its vast tracts of wild, rugged land. But when Idaho said no, the people who had known these wolves the longest stepped forward.
We've seen and experienced wolves from before the last ice age. We have our oral histories that talk about mastodons, that talk about saber-toothed tigers, those prehistoric wolves and bears. All these things had a huge impact on us.
That's James Holt, a Nez Perce member whose family played a key role in wolf reintroduction. Because the Nez Perce's survival was tied to the Northern Rockies ecosystem for so long, they were comfortable coexisting with wolves. This was true for the Holts for longer than most. James says his family lived off the land with traditional practices later than just about anyone else in the tribe.
They lived in a cabin with a dirt floor all the way up until the 1940s when they came down out of the mountains and took a place in Orfino where they took up ranching.
When American settlers came west, they didn't consult with James's ancestors or any Nez Perce members when they started exterminating wolves in the 19th century.
The Creator told us that it's our job to honor them, take care of them, to always nurture them, and we're failing. And that was the sadness that I've heard in the voices of my elders. We didn't do enough.
But when the state of Idaho refused to participate in wolf reintroduction, the tribe had a rare chance to fix what they saw as a historic wrong. The Nez Perce said, hey, if Idaho won't do it, we'll be the state agency. In an unprecedented move, the feds agreed. This paved the way for the people who lost the most from wolf eradication to play a crucial role in bringing them back.
I never actually saw them out in the wild, but to hear those packs howling at night and at dusk, powerful. To actually hear what would be the results of our reintroduction, to know that they're taking their place, that was a powerful experience for me.
The Nez Perce role in reintroduction is a story that's largely been lost to history. Until now. I'm Heath Drusen. From Boise State Public Radio and the Idaho Capital Sun, this is Howl, the story of nature's greatest comeback, what it's meant for the West, and how it could all be undone. Episode 2, The Unwritten Law. Hey Howl listeners, it's me, Heath. If you're interested in hearing more about wolf reintroduction in Idaho and Yellowstone, join me and the Idaho Capital Sun's Clark Corbin for an event on Tuesday, June 17th at 6 p.m. at the Boise State Special Events Center. We'll have a panel of key figures who played roles in bringing wolves back to the West. You'll recognize their names from the podcast. That's Tuesday, June 17th at 6 p.m. at the Boise State Special Events Center in Boise. The event is free and open to the public. Register online at boisestatepublicradio.org.
There's several information markers.
Okay.
Maybe we could leave the visitor center this way and take a gander.
Yeah, let's do that. For this part of the story, I traveled to north central Idaho with my co-reporter Clark Corbin. He's behind the scenes in a lot of the podcast, and he's writing a companion series for the Idaho Capital Sun. Clark and I started near the headquarters of the Nez Perce National Historical Park. We started on a bluff overlooking the Clearwater River, where ospreys were defending their nest. Okay, the osprey just flew off her nest and buzzed a blue heron. Do you see the blue heron on the...
I saw the charge.
Yeah.
It may not be over.
This park has preserved buildings and interpretive signs explaining thousands of years of Nez Perce history in the area. It's part of the Nez Perce Reservation, a stretch of grassland, forest, and small towns that is slightly bigger than Rhode Island. Sorry for that old cliche. It's also home to about 3,500 members of the tribe who call themselves Nimipu. While there, we spoke to Nez Perce members about their connection with wildlife, specifically their role in bringing wolves back to the West.
Well, my real name is Pakathaikatin, and my English name is Alan Pinkham.
Alan was one of two Nez Perce members who greeted the wolves with a prayer before they were released into Idaho 30 years ago. He lives on the reservation in a home on a patch of prairie grass and pine trees. Chickens and deer roam outside. And inside, the walls are lined with books and animal pelts.
Well, the Nipu name was given to me by my father when I was young. And he told the gathering that this young boy's name is going to be Pakathaikatin, which means 5 blue skies, or the deeper meaning is 5 rays of light.
Alan is 87 years old, and he knows what the Nez Perce lost when wolves were eradicated. He lived that loss.
I grew up here on the Nez Perce Reservation and the Yakima Reservation in Washington State, and I always accompanied my father and my older brothers when they went hunting and fishing. Ever since I can remember, I was maybe 2-3 years old, I was still out there in the mountains with them.
Tribal members say their people were already in the Northwest before the ancestors of other Native Americans crossed the ice bridge of the Bering Strait 30,000 years ago. Which is to say, long before settlers showed up, the Nez Perce lived in a wide expanse of land, covering parts of modern-day Idaho, Montana, Washington, and Oregon. It was many times larger than their current reservation. Alan says the Nez Perce view wildlife differently than most other Americans. They even refer to them as animal people. Before I could ask what that meant, Alan started telling me this story.
And at one time, we could speak to the animals. Long, long time ago. So many generations passed that we can't remember how many generations it was. But all animal people, the fish and insects and the birds and all the animals, we could talk with them. And all the animals could understand each other. Then the animal people, they started to complain, "You human beings, look what you're doing to us. You're eating us and you're utilizing our bones and hides for your tools and clothing, and you don't do anything for us." The animal people complained, and when we continued to do that, they said, "Well, we will not talk to you anymore. We'll be mute. And all you can do is just watch us. But we'll try to teach you how to live.
When I realized Alan was telling me an important Nez Perce origin story, I kept quiet. I wanted to hear it all to better understand the tribe's relationship with the environment.
And then we said, when it's necessary, we will talk for you among the human beings. And that's the way it is today. And we still practice that. We speak for the salmon. We speak for the grizzly bear. We spoke for the buffalo. And we still do. So this is our purpose, is to try to save these species from extinction.
What I learned from Alan is that the Nez Perce have a compact with animals and the environment to be good stewards of the natural world. It's called Tamalwit, or the Unwritten Law. Alan says this guided the Nez Perce for millennia. But this compact was challenged by settlers coming west. When the Lewis and Clark expedition reached Nez Perce territory in 1805, it was likely the first non-native people the tribe had contact with, but they were far from the last.
Our stories tell us what we have to do. But then when a new kind of people came to this continent, they told us otherwise. Don't practice your heathen ways. You've got to be a Christian. You got to be civilized. Well, what is civilization? From what I see, what civilization is, has always been how can you kill people in a most efficient way, in a most rapid way.
The settlers who came were also very efficient at killing wild animals, and wolves were at the top of their list. They didn't want wolves eating their cattle and sheep. The first permanent American settlement in Idaho was established in 1860, and in less than 100 years, wolves were gone. Alan says the loss of any species leaves a void for Nez Perce members. The loss of the wolf, or himeen in the Nez Perce language, was especially painful. In traditional Nez Perce beliefs, wolves are leaders of animals, and the Nez Perce felt they could learn a lot from them, including how to hunt.
Well, the wolf, he teaches us certain things. He has a little family group that the wolf sustains. And look at the way they hunt. Rarely do they hunt by themselves. And they know how to interact with other animals, particularly the grizzly bear. So when a grizzly bear and the wolves, they meet, they circle each other because they know they can be harmful to each other. So normally they don't fight. Rarely do they fight. So that's what we learn when we observe animals. How do they sustain themselves?
All of that was lost right around when Alan Pinkham's life began, when humans sent the leader of animals to extinction in Nez Perce territory. And several generations only knew a world without wolves. But then, in 1995, the Nez Perce got an unexpected opportunity to help bring the wolf back. That's next, after the break. So, as I mentioned, in 1995, Idaho legislators made it clear they wanted nothing to do with wolves. Idahoans had spent decades successfully ridding the state of predators to protect their livestock. And the people who led the state wanted to keep it that way. Here's then Idaho Governor Butch Otter advocating for opening a hunting season on wolves at an anti-wolf rally.
Folks, that management plan includes you. In fact, I'm prepared to bid for the first ticket to shoot a wolf myself. So we got it here, and we're going to manage it.
A lot of Idahoans shared his views. But Idaho didn't have much say in the matter at the time. More than 60% of the state is federal land. And on that land, the federal government is the boss. And when the Idaho government boycotted the reintroduction process, the feds quickly accepted the Nez Perce offer to step in. But a lot of people in Idaho were skeptical that the Nez Perce were up to the task. Aaron Miles Sr. remembers those feelings. He's the Nez Perce Natural Resource Manager, and he also played a role in the tribe's wolf program. At the time the tribe took over monitoring of wolves, he was finishing up a degree at the University of Idaho.
I'd hear all the chatter about, well, can the tribe do this? How can they do that? They, had all these questions, and sometimes it was racist. It wasn't just the fact that they were asking an honest question, but it had to be like, okay, these Indians, this or that, and I'm like, okay. And here I am, helping some of these guys with their homework, and that really upset me.
The University of Idaho students Aaron tutored weren't the only people who disrespected the tribe's abilities. A prominent rancher named Brad Little criticized the Nez Perce wolf efforts in a high country news article. He said, quote, "The tribe is kind of like a third wheel, as in they were mostly in the way." Idahoans should recognize the name. He's the governor now. And here's late Idaho State Representative Golden Linford again, talking about Idaho refusing to work with the feds.
The Fish and Wildlife Service have told us that they will, if Idaho doesn't want the contract, then they will contract with the Nez Perce Indians. And that possibility worries me a great deal.
Amid all the criticism, Aaron says he was inspired by the tribe stepping up.
For me, I was happy that we had asserted ourselves as a tribe to become a leader and do what was right in our viewpoint. It didn't have to be right according to a farmer or rancher, but it had to be right according to us. And so the leaders at that time made some really incredible decisions to not cower, but to go for it and persevere.
Marcy Carter was another one of the early Nez Perce members to work on the wolf program. These days, Marcy has a prominent environmental role for the tribe as the watershed coordinator. At the time of reintroduction, though, she was in her 20s and found herself at the center of the most controversial wildlife program in U.S. history.
I came on as a technician because I wasn't finished with my degree yet. But once our team kind of got rolling, and we had three teams that summer, and our goal was to go into the field, find paired up wolves that potentially had pups, and document the reproduction of those wolves, and also count how many pups were out there.
The released wolves had radio collars, so Marcy and her teammates would use radio telemetry to get an idea where they were. But observing them on the ground was a challenge. Wolves roam great distances in remote, often steep terrain. That makes it incredibly difficult to keep tabs on them.
Somebody would go up with a pilot, locate these animals, and then report it back to the ground biologists, and then we would hike in and try to locate them on the ground. We worked 10 days in a row, and then we'd take 4 days off. And we camped out. We backpacked and, lived in a tent and slept on our thermarest and ate packaged noodles. That was basically our lives during that time, was just backpacking, walking, hiking, listening.
It was a big adventure, but there was a reason for it. To manage wolves, you had to monitor them.
We would howl, see if we could get anybody to howl back. We were looking for anything, scats on the ground. Wolves typically would walk on the path of least resistance like us, so they would be dropping scats on roads, on trails, on trail intersections, on road intersections.
Marcy said she loved her time in the backcountry, but it did leave her isolated from loved ones for long stretches.
Back then, there wasn't cell phones, so if something happened at home, I missed it. And that one of those summers, my grandfather passed away around the 4th of July. And I didn't know until I came back out of the woods.
Despite difficult moments like that, Marcy said it was worth it. Her team was logging all this time in the backcountry to get a sense for how many wolves were out there and how they were doing. And they were doing really well. Actually, they were completely shattering even the most optimistic expectations. The Nez Perce managed wolves in Idaho for more than a decade. And during that time, the state's wolf population exploded. From 14 when they took over to nearly 700 when Idaho Fish and Game finally decided to manage wolves in 2006. At the time, it was a smooth transition. Later, though, a lot of tribal members would regret that handover. When the Nez Perce were monitoring wolves, there was a lot of fear around the animals. Montana Senator Conrad Burns said there would, quote, be a dead child within a year of reintroduction. That didn't happen. Not even close. And that's not what Marcy saw out in the wild.
I saw these families of wolves taking care of each other and playing, and they are not the evil that people think. They didn't eat me. They didn't attack me. And these are just my experiences, but the perception is just so wrong. And because they compete with people for food, I don't know, they just get that bad rap.
It still makes her emotional to think about what she saw and the hatred of wolves that threatens them to this day. As their population kept spiraling upward, wolves started bringing balance back to a broken ecosystem. They were keeping elk and deer populations in check, which was expected. But it's gone well beyond that. They may even be healing rivers.
Wolves definitely have changed this landscape.
But their success could also be their undoing. That's next time on Howl. Howl was created by me, Heath Drusen. It was written and reported by me and Clark Corbin. Johanna Zorn edited Howl. Mixing and sound engineering by James Dawson. Make sure to check out the companion written series at idahocapitalsun.com. That's capital with an A. It's different than the podcast and well worth checking out. Music from Artlist. Additional reporting from Mary Ellen Pitney. Thanks to Sasha Woodruff, Christina Lords, Tom Michael, Julie Lucchetta, Kyle Fahnenstiel, Katie Kloppenberg, and Lacey Daly. Special thanks to Morgan Springer. This episode includes archival sound from Idaho Public Television and KTVB. Ruth Brown was a big help with the IPTV material. Howl is part of the Boise State Public Radio podcast family. It's hosted in partnership with the Idaho Capital Sun, part of the state's newsroom network. Howl was edited with assistance from the editor corps of the Public Media Journalists Association, with support from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people. It was also supported by a grant from the Fund for Investigative Journalism.
Planet Money helps you understand the economy. We find the people at the center of the story.
Garbage in New York, that was like a controlled substance.
We show you how money influences everything.
Tell me what you like by telling me how you spend your money.
And we dig until we get answers.
I had a bad feeling you're going to bring that up.
Planet Money finds out. All you have to do is listen. The Planet Money Podcast from NPR.